Well, this is a session on inclusive higher education, roadmap strategies, how we can make these many century-old institutions more flat, more just, more equitable. And these are diverse college presidents who are actively leveling the playing field. We're thrilled today to have the panel leader, who many of you met last night, Carrie. And for those of you who weren't able to join us at the dinner, Carrie was one of the 2023 Inclusive Leader Award winners. She is the president and CEO of American Indian Higher Education Consortium, known as AHEC. Carrie's unwavering commitment to tribal education and strong sovereign nations has driven the 37 tribal colleges and universities, TCUs, and AHEC's umbrella. A member of the Navajo Nation, she has dedicated her career to equity-centered strategies and innovative policies rooted in tribal culture. Carrie's profound dedication to public service encompasses protecting and promoting American Indian cultures, rights, well-being, while improving educational standards and quality for all. Joining Carrie today is Brent, Chrite, president of Bentley University, Dr. Rochelle Ford, president of Dillard University, Dr. David Yarlott, president of Little Bighorn Tribal College, one of our partner colleges, as are all of these, and Joe Garcia, who is an esteemed lawyer and has an incredible background in government and education and law, and he's with the Colorado Community College system, runs the entire system. Let's give these folks a round of applause. He's Chancellor.
It's an honor to be with this amazing panel. I'm so excited. How many of you were at the dinner last night? Okay, about a third, I think. Well, maybe more than that. Okay, how many of you in this audience are students? Okay, good. Just asking because I'm trying to, I have way too many questions for the amount of time we have together, and I wanted to, so I'm going to kind of do a balance between talking to maybe more of the professionals, and then also, but I also think you all have so much to share with students and with young people who would like to grow and to be leaders of institutions of higher education or leaders in any field. So I want to ask you some of those questions also. But I'm going to start by asking, we're at this very strange time in higher education. Any day now, the Supreme Court is going to issue its decision on affirmative action, which many of us have benefited from. And that's going to just change the whole landscape of higher education. We've just come through a pandemic where we have a lot of students who didn't come back. And then we have a number of institutions that their enrollment actually grew. So there's dealing with that, the mental health issues that follow, that are lingering as a result of COVID, artificial intelligence. There's just so many things. And then just the day-to-day of being a president. So I don't know how you all do it. But I'm just wondering, as leaders of your institutions, what keeps you up at night? What are the big challenges you're facing?
I'll start since I have the mic. Thank you. I'm Joe Garcia with the Colorado Community College System. The thing that's really challenging right now for all of us, or at least for those of us at community colleges, is the decline in enrollment. We simply have fewer people showing up wanting to take advantage of our services, and what that means is we have less revenue. We have the less ability then to serve those students who do come to us. But I really think of those really as the symptoms. The real disease, I think, is the way that people view higher education. They don't view it as either relevant to their lives or they don't view it as accessible to them because of a perception of inaffordability. So I think we need to address those things. We have too many people at a national level, people with big microphones and big stages who are saying higher ed is bad. I can't imagine if there's anyone in this room who has a degree, even if you have debt, if there's anyone here who regrets having gone to college. I don't think most of us do. We know that our lives are different and better because of it. So the things that keep me awake at night are They're really concerned about how we get people to see higher education as relevant and as accessible and as something that will make their lives better, especially if they're from underrepresented communities.
Go ahead. I just greeted you in our native language, the Crow language. I want to start off by asking, how many of you know about tribal colleges? Not too many. So my viewpoints are going to be from that perspective. And what keeps me up at night is, are we providing enough resources for our staff, employees, and students to continue to be able to come to our classes? You know, with COVID, you know, the rising costs of food, fuel, utilities, how are they going to be able to continue to come to work or come to class if they're not able to provide for their families? So those are some of the things that keep me up. Everything else with perspective. As Native folks, as Native people, a new challenge is just a new challenge because every day we face challenges. So we don't treat it any different. We become agile, we become nimble, and move with what's in our environment. But again, if I am going to provide a quality service for our community, our students, I got to make sure that we provide for those other needs, not only for our employees, but our students.
Hi again, Rochelle Ford from Dillard University. Dillard University is the oldest historically black college or university in the state of Louisiana, founded back in 1869. And so one of the things that keeps me up at night, is similar to my colleagues, is the cost associated with higher education. Dillard University has 70% of our students are Pell Grant eligible, making them in some of the lowest quartiles of their families' socioeconomic levels. And while I still have a tuition that is under $20,000, Pell does not cover nearly the amount to go to a public, definitely not a private institution, even a private institution that's priced lower than many other schools in the nation, where you can attend Dillard cheaper than going to a public out-of-state college. When we look at the enrollment numbers across the nation of high schoolers who are able to go to colleges and universities, we're facing what we're calling the enrollment cliff. So there's fewer number of high school students who were born. Definitely, when we had the Great Recession back in, 2008, 2009, people weren't having as many children. And those children who were also born into some of America's, again, most lowest economic leveled families. So the cost of higher education, meeting the needs of our faculty and our staff, providing the services and the quality of education that individuals deserve, and the low level of funding that the federal and state governments are giving, as well as, I hate to say it, the reduced numbers for funding for education, particularly giving to diverse communities, particularly African American, Latinx, Native, Indigenous individuals, that although there was all these commitments in 2020 to invest in our communities, people have stopped paying on their commitment. So you couple those things together with the students who want to go but can't afford to go, and the lack of resources to go, and the price of education increasing, it makes it a very difficult paradigm in which we're having to operate in. But what I will say, despite what the Supreme Court may decide with regards to affirmative action, historically black colleges existed before there was affirmative action. We were founded when you had the Jim Crow South. We were founded right after the Civil War. We will exist before and after affirmative action.
Thanks for that. Good afternoon. Brent, Chrite, Bentley University. Shout out to my amazing students and colleagues from Bentley. So look, there are no shortages of factors and conditions that I think keep all of us up at night. And I mean, where do you want to start? Price point divergence, competitive pressures, technological evolutions, new entrant competitors, and we can go on and on. Issues of efficacy and ROI. Those are management issues, and we have to deal with those. The sort of existential issues that keep me up have to do with the recognition that in an economy that is increasingly defined by this convergence of digital and physical technologies, and where the capacity to compete and to be a value creator in a 21st century economy requires some sort of educational capability, whether it's degree, non-degree, short course, technical skills. How do we ensure that institutions like ours remain generative, accessible, affordable agents of student transformation and opportunity? I mean, that is fundamentally the question for me. I believe that talent and ability is widespread and ubiquitous, and access and opportunity are not. And so my job is to close that gap. My job is to recognize the opportunity for students to migrate up or down the economic ladder, and to therefore reduce the rungs of that ladder available to them. And this is at an expensive, white, private, conservative, Boston-based university with a less than stellar history among folks of color. And so in a time when we continue to be challenged and the orthodoxies and the ethos of inclusivity and diversity are being weaponized precisely at a time when it's most vital, I think is a fundamental issue of leadership requirements. And those are the things that I try to reflect most thoughtfully on.
Great, thank you. I think this is on. Thank you. Thanks for those thoughtful answers. I'd like to build on your last comment about, I guess, being, I don't know if nimble is the right word, but being able to change to meet this changing world that we find ourselves in, particularly if you're an old established institution of higher education. And then we have the tribal colleges and HBCUs, and you used to work at an HBCU, and community colleges, which really don't have those issues. Your institutions have been able to meet the needs of Native students, Black students, Latinx students, underserved students, low-income students, and I'm wondering what it is at your institutions or at institutions you've been at in the past, or how you're trying to transform your institution to make sure that you meet, how do you uniquely meet the needs of those students, of the students here, first-generation students, Indigenous, Black, Latinx students? So I'm asking that to everyone.
All right. I guess we'll start on this end. So yes, my previous presidency was at an institution on the other end of the spectrum, economically, culturally, academically, Bethune-Cookman University, an amazing, iconic institution in HBCU, and now I'm at Bentley University. You mentioned a lot of things in that question, the need to pivot and to challenge the structures and traditions of higher education and the way we think about interacting with the marketplace, to think differently about knowledge transfer and the acquisition of knowledge and the role of faculty and all of that. And whether it's Bethune-Cookman or Bentley, that's part of the conversation. The latter part that I want to get at is, here is a fundamental belief for us. So we've made a strong, intentional, necessary push for inclusivity and diversity. Not because it's well, look, there is a moral imperative. I'm happy to argue that moral imperative. But we do it because there's a strategic and economic imperative. We do it because if Bentley or any of our institutions want to be at their very best, how can they diverge so greatly from the pluralism and the diversity of the community and the environment and the country and the world in which they exist? We think that one of the great strengths of this country is, in fact, its pluralism, and we have an obligation to meet that if we want to be our absolute best. So that is the argument that we've taken, and I think it's been working. It's been about 6 months since I've been called woke and been threatened with withhold donations from alumni because they don't like the direction, but that is the right direction. That is the direction that we're going to take. And the final thing for me is, like, Bentley's an awesome place, and the outcomes of our students and their success is beyond debate. Why in the world wouldn't we extend it to all segments of our community? And so that's an easy argument. I wouldn't say easy. It's a necessary argument that we are making, and we think that we're better and richer as a result.
One of the things that I really appreciate that you said is that the business of diversity, equity, and inclusion is an economic imperative for the America and the global community. And it's not just an issue that we're dealing with here in the United States, it's an issue that we're dealing with in Sweden, in Norway, in Ireland, and every European country is dealing with diversity. And the other thing that I think is really important that a lot of folks forget about is that there's diversity within Caucasian Americans. When you look at any marketing 101 textbook, it talks about segmenting your market. And Caucasian Americans have been segmenting their own market for eons, since the beginning of marketing. This age group versus that age group, this religious group, this geographic group, you talk about demographics, geographics, what have you. It was always done within the Caucasian American communities. But now we're saying that look at the demographics, look at the buying power, look at the return on your investment of the consumer market, look at the return on the investment if you were to invest in your communities to create greater equality. If you look at the return on the investment of diverse boards, if you have women on your board, they're going to have higher returns on the economics, the bottom line of your business. The same thing if you look at the diversity of your boards with people for other races and ethnicities. It's the same argument that you invest in an HBCU. If you go and you fish where the fish are, if you want to say you want to diversify your employee base, then you should probably go and recruit at historically black colleges where there are a lot of African American talented individuals. If you look at the black middle class, it wouldn't be in existence if it wasn't for historically black colleges. And you can say the same thing about indigenous colleges. You can say the same thing about Hispanic serving institutions. If you want to increase your bottom line, if you want to have a return on your investment dollars, invest where you're going to get that highest return, which would be our institutions. One of the things too that I think is very, very important as we have these conversations is not to think about our communities in a deficit mode. We are excellent, we are powerful, we are innovative, and we will help any organization, including investing in indigenous businesses, investing in Latinx businesses, investing in African American businesses. We can be for us, by us, and continue to be amazing. And so I think we have to operate from a perspective of it's not just about sending our students and talent to graduate programs at Caucasian, predominantly white institutions. It's about them sending their employees and their students to historically black colleges, indigenous community colleges, to Latinx, Hispanic serving institutions so they can increase their IQs, their emotional intelligence levels, so that they can increase their own bottom lines, versus thinking about it's always us sending our talent to their spaces. Maybe they should be sending their talent to our spaces.
You know, going back to the perspective of the community that we serve, as tribal colleges, many of us are at the associate 2-year level. So we have 3 main missions. 1, is transferability to universities. Secondly, prepare them for the work environment. Thirdly, which is our biggest mission, is maintaining our culture, our traditions, and our customs. Many of us are located on Indian reservations where we have very, very poor economic environments. And many times, because of that, being in rural areas, the world doesn't come to us. We have to take our students and our staff and employees out into the world. So for events like this, I really enjoy being at these places because I can listen, and I'm a good listener. I don't always speak because when you speak, you don't hear what anybody else is saying. I listen. What is going to work for us? And many times we don't have those resources, so we look for partnerships. Partnerships wherever we can that will be mutually beneficial, not only for us, but does it make sense for an organization to come in and work with us? So we're always constantly looking, seeking, looking over the horizon. And sometimes it may not be my idea to go in a certain direction, but I have to think in terms, what is the bestest for the mostest? And a lot of times, I may not understand it moving forward, but I sit down and talk with people. COVID, we went to a lot of virtual meetings. They were great, but what I miss is the social interaction, the business, the ideas that we're able to share face to face. And that's where the conversation becomes really rich. You see facial expressions, you hear the laughter, you feel the emotions. In that way, it validifies some of the things that you're looking forward to. So I really appreciate being here. We'll continue to seek the horizon. I'll continue to reach out, and hopefully our students and our employees will also follow suit.
Well, I want to get back to one of the things you mentioned about affirmative action, which at community colleges as open access institutions doesn't really impact us. But when we look at higher education generally, we often confuse exclusivity with quality. And a lot of institutions pride themselves on how many students they turn away rather than how many students they serve. We pride ourselves, I think at all of our institutions, by the number of people from different backgrounds, different abilities, different resources that we're able to serve effectively. Ultimately, that's the most important thing about higher education. And we also have to recognize that the competition for students is something we all face, but it is something that, again, we can't look at it from a deficit mentality, as you mentioned earlier. We've got to look at the opportunities that are out there. We know that in the United States, the number of white high school graduates is in decline. In fact, it's been in decline since 2012. But what's not been in decline is the number of Black, Latino, and immigrant high school graduates. But those are the folks we have at most institutions not served well. We need to serve those students and make sure they understand that we want to serve them and we don't want to turn them away, whatever their resource levels. But the last thing I'll mention there is the challenge for us at all of our institutions is we are often charged with serving students with the least in the amount of resources, and our institutions are also the institutions with the least amount of resources. That's the biggest challenge for us, is making sure we can provide a quality education with limited resources to very capable individuals who also come from backgrounds of limited resources. I think we can. I think HBCUs are the best example that, they've been doing that for more than 100 years, serving people with limited resources and turning out more Black doctors and lawyers than all the other white institutions combined, because they recognize that talent is ubiquitous, as you said earlier. It's everywhere. We just need to recognize it in whatever form it appears.
Great, thank you. There's a lot there in what you said, and just really important ideas and truths, I think, that I hope the group has time to think about and figure out what we can do or what we should be doing. I think there was a lot of talk about resources, the lack of student resources, the students not having the resources, the institutions not having the resources, the institutions that are most successful at educating the population that is growing, right? So how do we change that in the future? I mean, I want to ask that question. I don't know if you have an answer. How do we fix that as a nation? Because that's a national problem, right? There's something wrong with our whole system that is skewing what we value, because we value the exclusivity, right? And we shouldn't. Tribal colleges are doing amazing things in sustaining language and cultures and whole nations, teaching from their own worldview, but not anywhere near on the level of Harvard or Brown or even some of the state institutions. HBCUs graduate more doctors, black doctors, STEM professionals, just goes on and on, PhDs, than any other institutions, but we're not valuing them in how we provide resources to them. Then you add to the fact, what you said at the beginning, the population coming up, students, families, this country doesn't value higher education. So how do we address that issue of kind of reformulating or reallocating resources to where they need to be in a country that doesn't value what any of us are doing collectively? I mean, and how do we change that? That's something I think we've been grappling with, higher education has for years. So I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on that? Oh, I think I have his mic.
Well, first we have to recognize that in the last couple of decades, as public perceptions about higher ed have gone down, I think it's a function of the fact that the populations we serve have got increasingly more diverse. That as our campuses get blacker and browner, I think a lot of folks question whether what we're doing is really serving the best and the brightest among us. I think a lot of our institutions, again, community colleges, tribal colleges, HBCUs, have been seen as the institutions that serve those other kids, the kids who aren't good enough to go to the institutions that define quality as exclusivity. We need to get folks to recognize that it is not just in the interest of those students that they get educated, but in the interest of all of us. As our current population, our majority white population, is aging, I like to say our current workforce is getting grayer, but our future workforce is getting browner. And if we don't train up that workforce, which increasingly relies on skills and education that you only get in colleges and universities, our economy is not going to be successful. It's not going to be sustainable. We need to look at the black and brown and red young people in our communities and say, colleges are not just the hope for their future, but their going to college is the best hope for our future, collectively.
I'm not quite sure how to respond to that. Again, the environment is shifting. It keeps changing. And what I may decide, or we may decide today, the environment may be much different tomorrow. And again, it goes back to being nimble, being able to adjust. And how do we meet the needs of industry, companies, but also meeting the needs of our students? And in that sense, we're always continuously seeking, again, looking into the horizon. For us, it's a small tribal college. When we talk about diversity, there's not much diversity because we're a community college. 95% of our students are tribal members. It's an open campus. Anybody can enroll. Our non-native students fluctuate anywhere from 2, sometimes up to 10%. We don't treat them any different. Our tuition doesn't change for anybody. But moving forward, what do we do? Even with, I know the word AI came up. That is something that may be slow coming to our community, but it's those things that we have to continue to look in the horizon. How are we going to adjust? How are we going to know if there's AI being utilized, whether it's through scams or what have you? And just making sure that we're continuing to, be diligent and alert to the things that are changing around us. And again, I wasn't quite sure how to respond to that, but those are just some of the things that came to mind.
I think there's a couple of areas in which we as a nation, but particularly those of us who are allies to the black, brown, yellow, red, whatever rainbow you want to call our communities, allies, we all have to vote. Part of the reason why so much of affirmative action, diversity, equity, inclusion, and other initiatives are losing ground, the fight for LGBTQIA community rights, is that we as a people do not get out there and vote. We need to run for office, we need to vote. And when we don't, and when we say that we're just disappointed and America's going in the wrong direction, if we don't get out there and vote, it will not go in the right direction. And so it has to be civic engagement, but it also has to be economic engagement. If companies are not treating your communities right, boycott them. Don't buy their products. If they're not seeking after your dollar, don't give them your dollar. Support organizations, companies that invest in you. Because if we don't invest in us, nobody else will. So we have to be civically engaged. We have to make sure that we're economically engaged. But we also need our allies, people who have seats at the table, in boardrooms, people who are sitting in government officials. We have to make sure that we have partnerships and people advocate inside and outside of the system. When I was a young person, I said we should definitely talk about our own journeys and talk to students. I studied public relations. I maintained a membership in the Black Public Relations Society. Why? Because I needed a supportive, inclusive environment that would help propel me to know how to fight the battles as an African American going into that industry. But I always was active in the Public Relations Society of America, the predominantly white organization, because I needed to know how corporations thought, how they worked, and I did not care if I was the only woman in the room, the only African American in the room. There are things called Gen Xers, the only Gen X in the room. We exist, boomers and Gen Zs and millennials. There's a thing called a Gen X. And I was okay to be the only one in the room, but guess what I did? I brought my classmates from Howard, I brought my friends and colleagues from the Black Public Relations Society, and I brought them into the room with me. But I wanted to make sure I had a seat at that table. So you have to be able to work within the system, and you have to work outside the system. And when those two are pressing against each other, they can move organizations, they can move societies, but it takes inside and outside pressure. So we have to do all of the above.
So I think after my three colleagues, I don't know that I have anything new to add to that. But I'm going with Brother President, who said that's a hard question, and I don't want it. Anyway, whatever's next for you.
You know what I love about you? Can I say something?
I'll give you a mic if you won't.
No, but what I love about you is that you have worked inside the system at HBCU. and you helped to advance Bethune-Cookman. And then you took your talents and you went into one of the nation's top predominantly white institutions, and you're advocating for change in places and in boardrooms where there are not black and brown faces. And you are a prime example of making change in America. So thank you for doing that.
Right. You're doing exactly what Dr. Ford just described, what she said. And just to add to what Dr. Ford said, that's what I wrote down with my answer. Number one, it is voting. Number two, double Pell. So students don't have to worry about their finances. And along with that, free community college. If we had free community colleges, that would change a lot of things. So those are some of the things I think should happen. But one thing Shirley Chisholm said, you know what she said. She said, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. So that's what you did. And then also one of the speakers last night was saying, don't wait to pay it forward. That lift as you climb, that's exactly what you're describing, bringing people with you as you go. So really, really wonderful. So those are, I think you all have given us some clues. I'm going to transition a little from those bigger concepts to ones that might be more relevant to the students, although I think everything you said is directly relevant to them, but to them in their current trajectory, asking more kind of leadership skills, like how you got to be where you are. What do you think, let me see how much time do we have? What do you think, what do you believe, I guess, are the skills, or what skill, maybe just one thing that you either developed or you had that has helped you achieve what you've achieved so far?
So although I've spoken twice with the mic, I'll keep it again. I think the most important thing is to believe in yourself and to believe in your spiritual power and so for me, I believe that God has made me unique, that He loves me, and that He gives me skills in which I can use. And I feel obliged to use them. And so I believe in myself because I believe that God has not brought me this far to leave me, so that I can keep going every day. And I won't let other people define me, because I know God has defined me as good. So if you believe in yourself, believe in your God, or whatever you draw power from, and keep on pushing forward.
I was asked a question a number of years ago by a student about where's my path? What's my journey? And then I asked her, what's your purpose? And then she said, I don't know what my purpose is. And then I said, what is your passion? Then she bubbled up and started telling me about what her passion was. I said, love your passion. That becomes your purpose. And you got to enjoy what you're doing. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, then you're in the wrong business. So those are some of the things that I share with my students.
Well, I want to go back to what Dr. Ford said about believing in yourself. So many women, people of color, when they're given the opportunity to step into a new role, are hesitant. They're not sure they have earned it, or they're not sure they have the ability to do it. I'll tell you that white men from middle-class backgrounds never have that concern. They just assume they can do it. They assume they were born to it. I go back to my very first real job. I was hired out as a temporary day worker to load trash trucks. And I was on a big moving lot, loading that trash truck, and the supervisor eventually came out. There were several of us there, and he said, can any one of you drive this truck? Because I need someone who can now take it to the dump. Well, I hadn't driven a truck like that before, but I wasn't going to say no, because I wanted the opportunity to get an advancement. And so I figured to myself, if I can just make it off the lot without him seeing that I can't do this, I'll figure it out. That's the way I approach all jobs now. If I get an opportunity, I'm not going to limit myself. And I would urge all you students, don't limit yourselves. You'll figure it out. You will figure it the heck out. Trust in your ability, rely on others around you, listen, observe, and trust yourself.
Yeah, I think just really great points, and what resonates with me the most is, our students and young people in general who really sort of inspire me, and in today's world, I need that inspiration, and I'm glad it comes from them. And they talk about, well, look, I want to be happy, and they want to be prosperous, and they want to get the right sort of job, and they want to have the right salary, and those are all functions and foundations of happiness, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. But I would strongly urge, as has been said, for young folks to substitute meaning for happiness. Because if you can do work that is meaningful, if you can, as you said, find your passion and purpose, the happiness will be there, and it will endure in ways that I wouldn't before. And I am here because I have been just far more than I ever imagined or probably deserve, been blessed to be doing precisely what I was put here to do. And that's a pretty awesome thing. And I know it's rare, and it is my obligation to acknowledge it and to accept that grace and to steward it in a way that enables others. The other thing I would say, and this takes some time, this comes with wisdom and some knocks, but develop your core set of values and beliefs, your internal North Star, and never deviate from it, even if it costs you. And I think, again, that's tougher for young folks, but as you I'm pretty old at this point, but as you grow and thrive, I think those are some of the things that I hope that you'll be able to think about.
Great, thank you. Thanks for those responses. Really important information. I think, one of the things about developing your set of core values, defining those, taking the time to define it, it makes everything easier after that, right? Because you don't have to, should I do this? Should I do that? What should I do? If it doesn't match your core values, then you don't do it. If it does, then you do it. So it's just so easy. So it'll make your life easier. So if you haven't done that in the next few days, take some time to determine your core values and beliefs, and then stick to those. Great. I think a lot of times, even though I think you're all strong people, you have that passion and drive within you, but a lot of times there's someone outside who has influenced you, made a real difference in what you've been able to achieve, who's helped you. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about maybe someone who was a mentor, what skills they had, but who made a real difference in your life to help you move forward? How did that influence where you've gone?
So I've had so many people who have had influence in my life, beginning with my dad. He was first gen, worked his way through school. His parents, had 5th and 4th grade educations. So I could talk about him. One individual that I also want to share about is someone who I met in college. And Dr. Barbara Hines. Dr. Barbara Hines is I went to Howard University in Washington, D.C., and she dedicated her life, Caucasian American, blonde hair, blue-eyed, from Texas, to Howard University and to uplifting African Americans. And she was okay being the minority in the room as a white woman around predominantly black men. And she invested and embedded, and she was several roles, different times to me. One, she was a mentor to me who we would talk about life and issues and things and how to navigate situations. Other time, she literally was coaching me, just like a little baseball coach would do. Hold the bat this way and swing that way. And she would say, I want you to redo your resume like this, that, and the other. And it was very instructional. And then other times, she was sponsoring me, nominating me for awards or for programs or for fellowships. Sometimes I didn't even know that she was doing that, but I had built up a reputation in her mind that I was worthy of her attaching her name to me, so that she would say, you should hire Rochelle. And it was, no one had met me, but they trusted her. And so I think that it's important in me sharing that story for a couple of reasons. You need to make sure that you are open to mentors and people investing in you who look and are very different than you. Sometimes we think we have to be a female, so we can only have female mentors. You're black, you can only have a black mentor. Get past that. Sometimes you'll have people serving in different roles of mentors, as coaches, and as sponsors, and they might be 3 different people filling those 3 different roles. So I want you to think about that. I was lucky to have all 3 of those at different times in her, but I have others like Oldfield Dukes, who was my sponsor. I had others who are walking alongside of me as an African-American woman, like Cheryl Proctor Rogers. I have others who have coached me in other ways, like Dr. Robert Smith from UT Martin. So think about having a constellation of supporters, and don't be afraid to have supporters and people who you work with who are very, very different than you.
I would have to say that it started out with family, my parents, and then as I moved on in through school systems, some of my teachers, coach. But one particular event, I'll share this story with you, was when I was working on my doctoral dissertation. I went to one of my clan elders to ask for advice on how to go about doing this research on our people, the Apsáalooke Nation, without offending our elders. Then he asked me, what is your Apsáalooke name? What's your Crow name? And I introduced myself earlier with that. Balakhisash, outstanding singer. I didn't have a name. I said, hold on, you got to stop your research right now if you want to do this appropriately and culturally if you want to be accepted by the people. We better give you an Indian name first, Crow name. So I held off my research for 5 months while we went through the process. And at that event, at a clan day in Pryor, Montana, he started explaining to me, I had a vision when I was 24 years old. I went on a fast. The 4th night, while I was sitting there at the campfire, unknowingly, 4 beings came and visited my campfire. Alut Shilish, Yellow Arrow. Balakhisash, outstanding singer. Uso, never ending. And I can't remember the 4th one. He said, I'm going to name you outstanding singer. And he fasted when he was 24. He was in his 60s when he provided this name to me. He said, outstanding singer, that doesn't mean that I'm an outstanding singer, I'll tell you that right now. And he said, you're going to become a leader at some point. And people are going to come to you. And at that time, I was a really shy person. You get me in front of a crowd like this, I start sweating, start stuttering. You probably can't see that now. But at that time, I couldn't see myself in a position like that. He said, I called you outstanding singer because someday you're going to get in front of crowds and people will want to hear what you have to say. And I had no ambitions of becoming a leader. I was a wildland firefighter, 24 seasons. And I had no ambitions of being in the positions that I have been. But through that guidance, just his wishes, the prayers and ceremony that went, has guided me to all the different positions I've been in. I never seek these positions, but it's the people that trust me to put me in those positions. So if there is a mentor, I would say it was the Creator that provided the path for me.
Well, I want to mention a couple of different people, but I want to start with, as many of us do, with my mom. We were from a small rural community in northern New Mexico. Most of my relatives didn't go on to college. My mom didn't go to college. She got married at an early age, had 5 kids by the time she was 23, and had to focus on raising those with a husband who was a soldier and who was often gone. So she couldn't go to college, but she felt she was smart and was deserving of more, and that we should be as well. And so there were always books in the house. There was always an emphasis on school. And all 5 of us not only got through college, but went through graduate school. And then my mom, when she was 56, started at the community college in our area. And she finished her associate's degree, and then she enrolled at a university and earned her bachelor's degree when she was about 64, and said, now I'm going to get a better job. And she did. But it was really clear to me that she not only talked about the value of education, she lived it, even at a point in her life when a lot of people would have thought it was a waste of time. In her view, it's never a waste of time. And while I wasn't always a good student, I was a persistent one. Then when I got out of law school, I got a call from a guy who graduated from law school maybe just a year or 2 ahead of me. He didn't know me, I didn't know him. We had gone to different law schools, but he was here in Denver, where I was coming, and he was another Latino lawyer. And he called me and just said, hey, I understand you're coming, and I just want you to know I'm here. I've been doing this for a year or 2. If I can ever help you, just call me. And that guy's name was Ken Salazar, and he went on to become general counsel to the governor. He became attorney general. He became a senator, U.S. senator. Now he's the ambassador to Mexico. He still calls me once in a while and just says, how's it going? He helped me get my first job in government. And he always wanted to know, how's it going? What can I do to help? Folks like that are invaluable, but what's most invaluable is for you to recognize you can be that person. If you're in college, but you're a senior, you can reach out to a junior or a sophomore or a high school student and say, you can do this, and I want to help. In my role now, and when I was a president of university, when I was president of community college, when I was lieutenant governor, if a person of color who was a student or an employee called me and said, hey, I'd like to just sit down and talk about my future and what I could do, I never said no. Those are the students, those are the individuals we should always look to help because somebody helped us. That's really how we build a future that works for all of us.
Thanks. I know we're running out of time. I'll be brief. First, I want to give a quick shout out to Carol because this is awesome, and I've been working with Carol for 5 or 6 years, and just wonderful to see what this has become. In terms of the last question, just again very briefly, my mom raised us in Detroit in the 70s on her own, and so that's that. And so she was amazing, but none of us got here on our own. And there's this sort of conservative maxim, this axiom, if you will. And look, I'm a business school guy. I spend a lot of time with business executives. I spend a lot of time in corporate boardrooms. And there's this sort of conservative notion that when you talk about the role of others and mentors and how you didn't get here on your own, this is almost offensive to them. And they're just wrong. They did not get to where they are on their own. For me, there's a former dean at the Law School of the University of Michigan, a former president. He was former president of Michigan and Illinois, who's been vitally important to me, not unlike your experience. And when someone nominates you for something, and then you're required to get yourself elected. You know, you've got the name and reputation of this individual who submitted your name in the, colloquially. And so I was driven even further to ensure that I would succeed and not embarrass him and that sort of thing. And I can't not discuss what you just said. To the young folks in here, no one will say no to you, like ever. If you say, don't go say, look, do you have a job for me? They might not call you back. That's not how you network, right? No one will say no to you if you ask, can I get a half hour of your time to pick your brain? No one. And it is your obligation to say that. And that's how relationships can start. And so I encourage you to think about that. Okay, I see Carol here. Thanks.
Carrie can close out.
Thank you all. This has been so enlightening and helpful. Let's give our panelists one more. Thank you so much. I actually thought we had 3 more minutes, so.
We'll take the 3 to wrap.
No, it's 2 now. But,
Okay.
but I think we did wrap up, and I asked for, because my last question was going to be, what additional advice do you have? Or do you have one piece of advice to give to the students, people here? And I think you all did that in your last response. So unless somebody has something burning that you really want to say. It's just been fabulous, talking at the really high level about the future of higher education and then talking individually one student at a time, how to succeed. So thank you all. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for your selfless commitment, for your passion and your drive and your unwavering North Star that you're working toward. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.